John heard the soft whimpering first, faint, shaky, like someone crying through the cold. He followed it down the snowy slope behind the barn, boots crunching, breath fogging in the sharp mountain air. Near the frozen stream, curled beside a boulder, was a foal. Its legs were tucked tight, its body trembling, and one of its front hooves was bent wrong. John dropped to his knees. "Oh, no. Hey, little guy," he whispered, eyes wide. "You're hurt badly, huh?" The colt blinked at him, big glassy eyes full of pain but not fear. That hit John like a punch. Everyone else ran from him since his parents died last spring. But this little creature didn't. He pulled off his coat and gently laid it over the foal. Then he ran, heart pounding, all the way home to fetch his grandpa. Grandpa Thomas shook his head when he saw the foal. "It's got a broken leg, John. Most folks would say, let it go." John looked up, defiant. "But I'm not most folks. They brought the foal into the old shed." John slept there that night, curled in hay beside the tiny body, feeding it. Bits of apple and warm milk through a bottle. The colt's nose nuzzled into his chest. "I'll call you Sereno," he whispered. "You're quiet like the snow, but you're not gone." Days turned into weeks. Sereno stood, stumbled, stood again. John was always there, brushing his coat, singing soft songs, reading him old storybooks by lantern light. "You're not alone anymore," John often said. "And neither am I." Spring melted the snow, and Sereno's legs grew strong. He followed John everywhere, through fields, up trails, even to the edge of the village school. People watched in wonder, but John didn't care. He had his best friend, and yet deep down, he knew. Nothing this perfect could stay untouched forever. Something would come sooner or later to test what they had built. Sereno trotted behind John like a shadow with hooves. Wherever the boy went, the horse followed. School, the market, even Sunday church. At first, the villagers raised eyebrows. They whispered, laughed a little. But after a while, the laughter softened. It turned into smiles. One morning, John tied Sereno outside the schoolhouse. His teacher, Miss Clara, peeked through the window and smiled. "That horse again?" she asked kindly. John just nodded. "He waits for me. Always." During lunch, while the other boys kicked a soccer ball across the field, John sat on the fence, brushing Sereno's thick mane. "You're better than all of them combined," he whispered. "They don't even talk to me." Sereno leaned into his touch, closing his eyes like he understood every word. And maybe he did. Every time John was quiet or sad, Sereno was there, nudging his arm, nuzzling his neck, standing so close their hearts almost beat as one. In the evenings, John would lie on Sereno's back under the stars, telling stories. "I miss Mom and Dad," he'd say softly. "But you make the world less empty." At the village market, people began greeting Sereno by name. Little kids would wave, and shopkeepers left out apple slices just for him. "He's part of the boy," they'd say. "Can't tell where one ends and the other begins." Even at church, Sereno stood outside the doors, head bowed, as if listening too. Grandpa Thomas chuckled one day, saying, "Maybe Sereno's got more souls than half the village." Still, John never forgot the cold night by the stream. That memory stitched them together, and though life felt steady now, deep down, something stirred, like quiet clouds gathering far away. Because in stories like this, peace never lasts forever, and someone was watching. Someone who didn't believe in miracles like Sereno. "Get that dirty beast away from my fence!" The voice came sharp, cutting through the morning air like a knife. Old Mr. Griggs, their grumpy neighbor, stood with arms crossed, glaring at Sereno. John froze. His hand rested gently on Sereno's neck. The colt didn't flinch. He just stood tall, calm like always. "Go play with real boys," Mr. Griggs spat. "Not animals, you're too soft, boy." John didn't say a word. His fingers stayed on Sereno's warm skin. He just walked on, head down, heart heavy. Sereno trotted beside him, silent but strong. People talked. Some laughed behind John's back. But Sereno never left his side, not for a second. When school felt lonely and home felt cold, Sereno was still there. Then winter came hard. Snow blanketed the village, and one night, John's father collapsed in the kitchen. The hospital was, hours away. They rode through the snow, John clinging to his father, Sereno running like the wind. At the hospital, they rushed his dad inside. John wasn't allowed to go in, so he waited. Sereno waited too. He stood outside the window of room 12, head high, eyes fixed. Day after day. Snow fell on his back. Ice clung to his tail. He never moved. Nurses whispered about the horse who never left. John sat by the window, hands pressed to the glass. "He's not going anywhere," he whispered. "He knows you're in there." Sereno's breath fogged the glass. He stood guard like a soldier, his eyes full of something no one could explain. And one morning, John saw it, his dad's fingers twitching. A sign. A hope. But just as John smiled, a man in a long coat stepped out of a black car, staring straight. Sereno. He didn't look kind. Thunder cracked like a whip across the sky. Rain came hard, crashing down in thick sheets. But it was the fire that everyone feared. Lightning struck the old barn near the village edge. John had gone inside to help a neighbor's goats. In seconds, the roof caught fire. Flames roared. Smoke poured out the cracks. From across the field, Sereno reared up, wild with panic. He could smell John, hear his voice. "Help!" John's scream cut through the wind. Sereno galloped, hooves pounding mud. Villagers shouted for him to stop, but he didn't hear them. His heart was louder. He kicked the barn door. Once. Twice. The wood cracked, but it held. Inside, John coughed, crawling toward the flicker of light. His hands burned. Eyes stung. "I'm here," he cried. "Sereno, please!" The door burst open. Through smoke and fire, Sereno charged in. John tried to stand but collapsed. Sereno bit gently into his shirt, tugging. Then, with one strong pull, he dragged John toward the light. Flames kissed Sereno's side, but he didn't stop. They burst out just as the roof caved in. Villagers rushed forward. One tried to grab John. Sereno neighed, blocking them with his body. His eyes were wild but full of love. They let him be. That night, John lay wrapped in blankets by the fire. His arms were burned, his face pale. But he was alive. Sereno stood close, his nose pressed to John's cheek, breathing soft and slow. "You saved me," John whispered. "You really saved me." Sereno blinked like he understood every word. Rain still fell outside, but in that room it was quiet. Just a boy, a horse, and the space between their heartbeats. Then came a knock, heavy, slow, and a voice through the door said, "That horse belongs to me." The door creaked open, and two men in uniforms stepped in, eyes locked on Sereno. "That's the one of them said. "Too wild, too dangerous." John sat up fast, wincing from the pain in his bandaged arms. "No, he saved my life. You weren't there. He pulled me out of a burning building." The taller man didn't blink. "Rules are rules. That horse should have been registered. He's a risk." John stood, his voice shaking. "He's not a risk. He's family." Outside, the villagers were gathering. Whispers spread like wind through dry grass. A few people who once looked away now stepped forward. An old woman, her hands trembling, spoke first. "That horse has more heart than half this town," another added. "He saved our boy. We owe him." Someone pulled out a notepad. "We're signing a petition. Sereno stays." John looked around, eyes filling with tears. One by one, neighbors, young and old, put their names down. Still, the officers didn't move. John knelt beside Sereno, resting his forehead against the horses. "They don't know you," he whispered, "but I do, and I'm not letting you go." Sereno nuzzled John's cheek, soft and steady. The officers exchanged a look, then turned away. "We'll report this," one muttered. "But for now, he stays." Cheers broke out. John smiled for the first time in days, but deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. That night, John lay awake, listening to Sereno breathe beside the window. The stars blinked above like tiny hopes. "Don't worry," John whispered. "I'll protect you now." But across town, a phone rang in a dark office. A man answered with a cold voice. "So the horse is still there?" He paused, then smiled. "Then, it's time I pay them a visit." John hammered the final post into the ground, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sereno stood nearby, watching like he understood the moment. It wasn't just a fence. It was the beginning of something bigger, something healing. Kids arrived slowly at first, some in wheelchairs, some with braces on their legs, some too quiet to speak. But the moment they saw Sereno, their eyes lit up. John lifted a small boy onto Sereno's back. The horse didn't move an inch until the boy gave the softest pat. "He's safe," John whispered. "Sereno knows how to listen." Each day more children came. Some laughed, some cried. One little girl, no older than 7, wrapped her arms around Sereno's neck and whispered, "He knows I'm broken." John knelt beside her, his voice soft. "So was he. Now look at him." Sereno moved with such care you'd think he was stepping on glass. He carried each child like they were treasure, like he could feel their pain and wanted to take it away. One boy, scared to speak for weeks, finally broke his silence. "Can I come back tomorrow?" John smiled. "Every day, if you want." They named it Hope Trail. No fancy signs. Just love, trust, and one horse who never gave up. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped low, John sat beside Sereno on the grass. "Did you ever think we'd be here?" he asked. "Helping others feel whole again?" Sereno flicked his ear, then rested his head on John's shoulder. It was quiet, peaceful, but even in the calm, something tugged at John's heart. A letter had come that morning, sealed and heavy. He hadn't opened it yet, but tomorrow he would, and everything might change. The envelope shook in John's hands. His name was printed in bold, cold letters. He tore it open, eyes scanning too fast. Drafted. Age, 18. Report next week. His legs felt weak. Sereno stood outside the window, his nose pressed to the glass like he already knew. That night, John walked to the barn. Sereno greeted him with a soft whinny. "I have to go," John whispered. "They're sending me to war." Sereno didn't move. He just stared, ears tilted like he could hear the fear in John's voice. The day of departure came too fast. An army truck rumbled down the dirt road, kicking up dust. Villagers gathered. Some waved, others wept. John held Sereno's halter tight. "I'll come back, I swear." He kissed the horse's nose and stepped onto the truck, but Sereno wouldn't budge. He followed the truck, hooves pounding, eyes locked on John. Soldiers tried to stop him, but he dodged every hand. Finally, at the edge of the village, John jumped down. "Stop," he told the driver. He ran to Sereno, hugging him so hard it hurt. "You have to stay, please. I need to know you're safe." Sereno snorted softly, as if trying to answer. "Wait for me," John whispered. "No matter how long it takes." Sereno didn't blink. He just watched as the truck drove off, dust swirling around his mane. Days passed, then weeks. Sereno stood at the same spot near the fence, eyes on the road. Rain fell, snow came. Still, he watched. Every sunset he'd lift his head, waiting for a shape to appear through the dust. He didn't know the time, but he knew love, and he was counting. Every hour. John's first letter came 2 weeks after he left. The envelope was wrinkled, the ink smudged. "Tell Sereno I miss him," he wrote. His eyes, his calm, the way he waits. Each letter carried something more than words. Sometimes a leaf, once a tiny horsehair bracelet, and always the smell, dusty, dry, like sand and fear. Back home, Sereno would press his nose to the paper. He stood still, eyes closed, as if listening to John's voice through the page. John wrote about nights too loud to sleep, about soldiers who reminded him of the kids at Hope Trail, scared, hurting, holding on. "I close my eyes and picture the barn," one letter said. "Sereno's breath on my neck. That's what keeps me going." Then, nothing. No new letters. No word. Helen, the baker, asked, "Maybe the mail's just slow?" But days turned to weeks. Sereno grew restless. He paced the fence line, snorted at the wind, and kicked the barn door open one night, searching. Then the truck came. No engine roar, just quiet wheels over gravel. A man stepped out, holding a crisp white envelope. Inside was no letter, just a folded flag and a single sentence. With honor and sorrow, the village fell silent. Sereno didn't. He let out one loud, broken neigh that echoed through the hills. Then he stood frozen, like he'd turned to stone. John's mother placed the flag on their porch, but Sereno kept turning his head toward the road, like he couldn't accept what it meant. He refused the apples he loved, refused sleep. He walked in circles through the night, stopping only to stare at the barn door. Something had shattered, not just in the family, but in Sereno too, and he wouldn't let go. Not yet. The army confirmed it days later. John had fallen, saving 2 others. No body, just the story, just the ache. The village mourned in soft ways. Candles on windowsills, flowers on the porch. People spoke in whispers. But Sereno, he didn't make a sound. He stopped eating, turned away from every hand that reached for him. His eyes looked empty, like someone had switched off the light inside. Helen, the baker, stood outside the fence and watched him. "That horse," she whispered. "He's grieving deeper than any of us." Sereno walked to the church every morning. He didn't wait for anyone. He just went. He stood at the door, nose nearly touching the wood, and let out the softest, loneliest neigh, like he thought John might answer from the other side. Then he'd turn around, head low, and walk back home. Every day. The same. John's mother left oats in his bucket. He didn't touch them, not even once. Kids from Hope Trail came by, hoping to cheer him up. One little girl climbed the fence and whispered, "Come on, Sereno, don't be sad." Sereno lowered his head, nudged her hand gently but didn't stay. He walked away. The barn felt hollow without John's voice. No footsteps, no soft laughter. Just the creak of wood and the echo of silence. Nights were the worst. Sereno stood outside, looking up at the stars. Still, waiting, like the sky might drop John back into his arms. The village wept and moved on. But Sereno didn't. He was holding on to something no one else could see. Something he wasn't ready to let go of. Not yet. The truck rolled into town slower than usual. The kind of slow that says something's not right. John's coffin was inside. The whole village came out. No one spoke. You could hear the wind move through the trees, soft and cold. Sereno stood by the gate, still as stone. His ears twitched once. Then nothing. 4 men stepped down with the coffin. The wood was polished, but no shine could hide what it carried. As they walked past, Sereno didn't move. His eyes followed the box like he already knew. Then came the sound. A deep, aching noise came from Sereno's chest. Not a neigh, not a cry. Something in between. A sound that made people stop. "Breathing, did you hear that?" someone whispered. Sereno walked forward, slow, careful, like each step cost him something. He reached the coffin and pressed his nose to the side. John's mother gasped, her hands to her mouth. "He knows," she whispered. "Dear God, he knows." Sereno didn't back away. He walked beside the coffin as the men carried it through the village. Step for step, head low, eyes locked. Kids clutched their parents. Grown men wiped their eyes like dust had blown in. All the way to the cemetery, Sereno stayed close, brushing the box now and then, as if he could somehow pull John back with his touch. When they reached the grave, the men lowered the coffin slowly. But Sereno didn't let them finish alone. He circled once. Then he lay down beside it, just like he used to when John napped in the barn. No one said a word, because sometimes even silence can break your heart. And Sereno's silence was louder than anything they'd ever heard. Rain began that night. Soft, first, then harder, but Sereno didn't move. He lay beside the grave, legs folded, eyes half closed, not resting, just waiting. People thought he'd come back after the service, but he didn't. Helen checked on him at dawn. Her umbrella flipped. In the wind. He's still there, she whispered. He hasn't eaten. Children watched from the road, hugging themselves against the cold. One little boy spoke so softly it almost got lost in the wind. He's still waiting for John to wake up. Day turned into night, night into day. The village tried. They brought oats, warm blankets, John's old hat, but Sereno didn't move. The rain soaked his coat. Mud crept under him. The wind howled like it was crying too. Some said, "It's not safe. He'll get sick." But no one had the heart to pull him away. One man stepped forward once, rope in hand. Sereno looked up, just once, eyes full of something ancient and broken. The man backed off. "He's grieving," someone said. "Let him grieve." On the second night, thunder cracked above the hills. Still, Sereno stayed. People began taking turns watching him. They lit small fires nearby, whispered prayers, told stories about John. It became something sacred, this quiet horse beside a quiet grave. Some said they saw him blink slowly, like he was dreaming. Others swore he never closed his eyes, but no matter what, Sereno never stood up. Not for hunger, not for cold, not even for love, because his heart hadn't accepted goodbye, and no one could tell him it was time. Not yet. The third night came without stars. The fire near the grave flickered low. The watchers had grown quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. And then it happened. Sereno shifted. He didn't stand. Not yet. But he raised his head toward the sky. Then, with a breath so soft it barely stirred the air, he let out a single trembling. It was quiet, but it held something final, like a song reaching its last note. Helen, standing nearby, whispered, "He's letting go." Slowly, painfully, Sereno rose. His legs shook from days without food or sleep, but he stood tall. He didn't look at the grave again. He turned, walked toward the church steps, and stopped right at the top. Then, he stayed. By morning, the village woke to candles lit across porches. Some walked up the hill, others just watched from below. Sereno stood like a statue carved from sorrow. One by one, people joined him. Some knelt, some placed flowers. No one spoke. Even the toughest men, those who hadn't cried at the funeral, wiped their faces when they saw him. A farmer whispered, "I've never seen a goodbye hurt so much." Helen brought bread and placed it gently by his hooves. "He's saying goodbye," she said. His way, children lit small candles around the steps. A few drew hearts in the dirt with their fingers. And Sereno just stood there, not waiting anymore, just remembering. As the sun climbed, his eyes closed for the first time in days. He was tired, but peaceful. And everyone knew. The hardest part wasn't losing John. It was knowing when it was time to let go. The grass still hadn't grown back where Sereno had stood. The spot stayed bare, like the earth itself remembered. A week after, the farewell, the mayor came to Helen quietly. "We need to do something," he said. "Something that lasts." And so, beneath the old oak tree near John's grave, they placed a statue. Bronze, simple. It was Sereno, head tilted slightly, as if listening to the wind. His tail swept back like he was still walking forward. Children came first. Little hands left red apples by the statue's hooves. One girl whispered, "He still looks like he's waiting." Veterans, stiff in their uniforms, came next. Some stood in silence. Others raised their hands in salute. One old man placed his medals at Sereno's feet and said, "He's a soldier too." The statue didn't shine. It wasn't meant to. It just stood there, proud and still, like Sereno had on that long walk to the grave. People started visiting more than just John's tomb. They came to sit under the tree beside the bronze Sereno. Weddings, picnics, prayers, it all happened. There now, old folks would rest on the bench nearby and say, "That horse taught us more about love than any sermon ever did." Helen came every Sunday. She'd brush her hand along the cold metal and smile softly. "Still watching over him?" "Aren't you?" she'd whisper. And maybe he was. Even the birds seemed quieter near the statue, as if they understood. As if they were trying not to disturb the memory. That place, once full of sorrow, began to feel like peace. But Helen knew the story wasn't done. There was something left. Something John had never shared. And soon, she'd find it. Because love, like that, doesn't just leave memories. It leaves messages. Helen was dusting John's old room when her hand hit something under the bed. A wooden box. The kind soldiers took to war. She pulled it out, heart already racing. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Each one carefully folded, written in John's rough handwriting. But they weren't for her. They were for Sereno. Helen sat on the floor, reading in silence. "If I don't come back, take care of the others. You always knew how to calm me down. Better than anyone. If there's ever a day without me, be brave. Just be you." Her fingers trembled. These weren't just letters. They were love, packed into paper. That evening, Helen walked to the statue. The wind was quiet. The world felt still. She placed the box of letters beside Sereno's bronze feet. People noticed. No one touched them. But soon flowers joined the letters. Apples, dog tags, even a child's drawing of Sereno and John. And Sereno... He stayed. He didn't wander far anymore. Day or night, rain or shine, he stood by the graveyard fence, watching, waiting. People began whispering, "He's guarding something sacred." The place changed. Folks knelt, lit candles, said soft prayers. They called it the Horse's Chapel. Tourists came, not to take pictures, but to leave things behind. Letters of their own. Notes to those they missed. Wishes. Thanks. And Sereno watched it all. Helen stood by him one morning and said gently, "You kept his promise better than anyone ever could." He blinked slowly, calm. But his eyes looked older now. Something in them said he knew his own time was getting close. But not yet. Not while there was still love to guard. The winters grew colder. Sereno's walks grew slower. His once black mane faded into silver strands. But every morning he still made his way to the graveyard. He would stop by the statue, lower his head, then walk to John's grave and stand for hours, unmoving. People stopped trying to call him back. They just watched from afar, hats in hand, hearts heavy. One morning, Helen brought him a blanket. "You don't have to stay out here, old boy." But he didn't move. He just looked at her, quiet and calm. Then, on a still spring morning, Sereno laid down beside the grave. He didn't whimper, didn't cry, just folded his legs slowly, gently, like he was tired after a long ride. Children gathered first. "Is he sleeping?" one asked. Helen knew better. She knelt beside him, resting her hand on his head. "He's home," she whispered. They buried Sereno beside John under the same tree near the same statue. That day, the village bells rang longer than usual. Shops closed. Farmers left their fields. Even the wind felt like it held its breath. They carved two names into a shared stone. John, the boy who fought. Sereno, the horse who waited. Years passed. Grass grew. New kids played nearby. But when the wind blew just right, some swore they could hear hooves across the hills. Laughter, too. The kind that only came from two best friends who found each other. Again, visitors still come. Some cry, some smile. All leave feeling something deep they can't explain. Because love like that, it doesn't end. It doesn't vanish. It becomes the wind. And the wind still waits.